The first time I heard her call me a freeloader, she didn't even know I was in the next room. It was the kind of word that sticks, heavy, ugly, sharp. And though she only whispered it to her sister on the phone, it rang in my ears louder than any scream ever could. "She's lucky Nathan took pity on her," I heard Margaret say. "She brings nothing to the table. Just floats around the house like she owns it." At that moment, I was literally folding her laundry. I married Nathan Blake 2 years ago, during the kind of wedding people roll their eyes at, small, intimate, and not particularly Instagram-worthy. We didn't have much back then. He had just started his architecture internship, and I was fresh out of a failed family business that left my savings in ashes and my confidence worse. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had made her opinion clear from the start. "You sure she's the right match for you?" she asked Nathan at our engagement dinner. "She doesn't have much going on, career-wise." "She's rebuilding," Nathan told her. "And she's brilliant." But Margaret only heard rebuilding and locked it in her mental list of reasons I didn't belong in the family. When the pandemic hit, I lost the small marketing job I'd landed just months earlier. It was a gut punch, and with nowhere else to go, Nathan suggested we stay with his mom for a while, just until we could get back on our feet. Big mistake. Moving in with Margaret was like signing up for a silent competition I didn't even know I was in. She never said anything outright, at least, not when Nathan was around. But the comments piled up, subtle as poison. "Oh, you're still in pajamas? Must be nice. I'll do the dishes." I'm sure Samantha's had a long day of resting. "She used to work, right?" I laughed them off at first. Even pitied her. She'd been a single mom for years after Nathan's dad died, and I figured that kind of strain makes people tough, guarded. But slowly, her words started to burrow into me. Was I freeloading? Was I just taking up space? Nathan, to his credit, tried to stand up for me. "She's looking for work every day, Mom," he'd say. "She's not sitting around doing nothing." Margaret would smile tightly. "Of course, dear. I'm just old-fashioned. I believe in pulling one's weight, that's all." I wanted to scream. I cooked. I cleaned. I took freelance gigs for pennies. I updated Nathan's portfolio, built him a website, even rewrote his resume so well he got 2 interview callbacks in the same week. But in Margaret's eyes, that wasn't contribution. That was hobby work. It got worse when her finances began to crumble. Nathan came home one day with a worried look on his face. "Mom's behind on the mortgage," he said quietly. "She hasn't told the bank yet, but she's 3 months late." My heart sank. What happened? Medical bills. Credit card debt. She maxed out her savings helping Jordan, remember her nephew? Of course I did. The one who never called unless he needed something. "She needs help," Nathan said. "And honestly, we don't have the means." But I did. Sort of. I hadn't told Nathan about the freelance client I landed, a publishing startup that needed full-scale branding. I worked nights on it for months, poured my soul into it. They paid late, but when the check finally came through, it was more than I'd made in a year. It wasn't enough to erase Margaret's entire debt, but it was a start. Still, I hesitated. She thought I was a leech. An empty space in her house. Why should I give her anything? Because it wasn't about her. It was about us. About protecting Nathan from watching the only parent he had left lose her home. I stayed up that night looking over Margaret's bills. Quietly. Secretly. Credit cards with interest rates that made me nauseous. Hospital charges still unpaid. An overdue notice from the electric company with red, blocky letters. I could make a dent. If I gave up everything else I'd planned to do with the money. No new laptop. No car upgrade. No savings buffer. Just peace. For Nathan. And maybe, in the end, that would be worth more. The next day, I called the creditors one by one. Explained myself. Negotiated payment plans. Wired the first round of payments without a word to Margaret. And then I waited. Not for thanks, she didn't even know. I waited for relief to settle in. For Margaret to stop flinching when the phone rang. For Nathan to finally breathe easy. But instead, 2 days later, I heard her again, on the phone, her voice dripping with venom. She still hasn't found a real job, she told someone. At this point, I think Nathan married her out of guilt. I stood outside the door, trembling, heart pounding in my chest. I had just paid her $3,200 in overdue bills. And I was still the freeloader in her eyes. I didn't say anything. Not when Margaret scoffed over the phone, not when she walked past me in the hallway with her usual fake smile, not even when she served me breakfast the next morning with a cheery, "So what are your plans for today, Samantha? Or is it another pajama meeting with Netflix?" I wanted to throw the receipt from the hospital bill on the table. I wanted to scream, "You wouldn't have a home to sit in if it weren't for me." But I didn't. Because this wasn't about being right, it was about protecting Nathan. He had been happier lately. The stress lines around his eyes were softening. He smiled more, laughed easier. I knew he thought it was because Margaret's financial problems were fading. And in a way, he was right. But I was the reason for that peace. Me, the so-called freeloader. I kept making payments quietly. Every time a freelance check cleared, I sent it off to the credit card companies, the hospital, the mortgage collector. I cut my own spending to nearly nothing. I turned down friends when they invited me out. When my shoes got holes, I patched them with glue instead of buying new ones. All while Margaret criticized me behind my back, or worse, to my face. One day, she caught me researching design software and said, "Oh, still playing around with colors? That's cute." I smiled and said nothing. What I really wanted to say was, that software subscription. I canceled it so I could pay your overdue utility bill last month. But again, silence. Silence was safer. The worst part was pretending in front of Nathan. I hated keeping secrets from him. We never lied to each other, until now. But every time I tried to bring it up, something held me back. Maybe pride. Maybe fear. Maybe the part of me that still wanted to prove I didn't need recognition to do the right thing. But keeping it all inside started to weigh on me. One evening, as Nathan and I sat on the back porch watching the sun dip behind the trees, he reached over and gently touched my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "You've been quieter lately." I smiled tightly. "Just tired." He kissed the top of my head and said, "I know things have been tough here, but Mom's trying, you know?" I looked at him, stunned. "Trying?" I repeated. "Yeah," he nodded. "She told me she's been working out her debts. Said she got serious about managing her money again. I'm proud of her, actually." That was the moment I realized she was taking credit for it. Margaret had noticed the silence of the phone calls, the missing bills, the lack of red envelopes. She had no idea why things were suddenly settling, but rather than wonder, she claimed it. I felt the anger rise in my throat like bile. But I bit it back. Again. For now. Then came the breaking point. Nathan got home from work one Friday holding a bottle of wine and grinning. "Big dinner tonight," he said. "Mom wants to celebrate. She says she's officially out of the red, completely debt-free." I froze. "She, what?" "Yeah," he beamed. "I mean, I don't know how she did it, but that's amazing, right?" "No. Not amazing. Infuriating." I went upstairs, locked the door, and stared at the payment tracker on my laptop, my spreadsheet, my sleepless nights, my sacrifice. $18,740. That's how much I had paid across 6 months. every last dollar gone. She hadn't paid a cent. I felt the pressure build in my chest until I couldn't breathe. I wasn't going to say anything. But then, I saw the new handbag in Margaret's room that evening. Designer. Price tag still on it. That was it. At dinner, the table was decorated with candles. Margaret wore makeup. Nathan raised a glass. To Mom, he said, smiling. For proving everyone wrong. Everyone clinked their glasses. Everyone but me. I cleared my throat. I'd like to say something, I said, my voice steady. Margaret smiled smugly. Of course, dear. I looked directly at Nathan. Your mother didn't pay off her debts. The room went dead silent. I did, I said. Every bill. Every call. Every payment plan. I used my freelance earnings. I gave up everything I saved for just to make sure this house wouldn't be foreclosed. Nathan blinked, confused. Wait, what? Margaret's smile faltered. That's not true. I turned to her. I have receipts. Bank transfers. Confirmation emails. You didn't pay off a single cent of your debt. I did. The blood drained from her face. Nathan's glass clinked gently as he set it down. Is that true, Mom? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence that followed my confession was deafening. Margaret looked like I had slapped her across the face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Nathan stared between us, his expression a cocktail of confusion, betrayal, and shock. You paid off her debts, he asked again, as if he hadn't heard me the first time. I nodded. Every cent. Margaret finally found her voice, thin and defensive. I didn't ask her to do that. No, I said calmly. You didn't. You just insulted me while I was doing it. Nathan turned to her. Is it true? She hesitated. I mean, maybe she helped with some payments, but... I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Open on the screen was the spreadsheet I had kept meticulously over the past 6 months. Bank statements. Confirmation numbers. Payment schedules. My name on every transaction. Nathan scrolled. Slowly. His face drained of color. She's not lying, he whispered. Then he looked at his mother. You let me believe you turned it around. That you were finally getting control of things. You bragged about it. I didn't think it would matter. Margaret snapped. She wanted to feel useful. My breath caught. Useful. As if my sacrifice was a token gesture. As if giving up everything I had to save the roof over her head was a favor to my own pride. Not a lifeline to her dignity. You called me a freeloader, I said, my voice low. To my face. Behind my back. And I still paid off the debt you wouldn't even admit you had. Margaret's hands shook. I didn't think you'd make it a spectacle. I didn't want to, I replied. But you made a spectacle the minute you took the credit. Nathan stood abruptly. I need air. He walked out the back door and into the night, leaving Margaret and me at the table. I gathered my things quietly and stood to leave. Wait, she said, almost desperate. Why didn't you just tell him earlier? Why go behind his back? I stared at her. Because I didn't want him to see what you'd become. But you made that choice for yourself. I didn't go back to the house that night. I went to Rachel's, my college roommate and one of the few people who never judged me for rebuilding my life piece by piece. She opened the door, saw my face, and simply said, "Guest room's clean." I cried in the shower. Not because I was sad. Because I was exhausted. 6 months of biting my tongue, folding laundry, making sacrifices, only to be treated like a burden until I snapped. The next morning, Nathan showed up at Rachel's. He didn't call first. He just knocked. I opened the door cautiously. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. I had no idea about any of it. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside to let him in. He sat on the couch, hunched forward. "I should have noticed. I should have defended you when she made those comments." "Yes," I said quietly. "You should have." He looked up. "Do you hate me for it?" "No," I answered truthfully. "But I can't pretend it didn't hurt." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I confronted her last night. Told her she can't stay in the house if she keeps treating you like that." I raised my eyebrows. "What did she say?" "She cried. Accused me of choosing you over her. And I told her she's right." We sat in silence for a while. "I love you, Sam," he said finally. "But I don't want you to come back into that house unless you feel safe. Respected. Equal." I nodded. "I'm not ready yet." "I know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "This is the deed transfer. I'm putting the house under both our names. If we get through this, it's yours as much as it's mine." I didn't take the folder. "Not yet." Instead, I looked at him and asked, "Do you believe I'm a freeloader?" He shook his head immediately. "No. I believe you're the strongest person I know. And I let you suffer in silence because I didn't want to upset my mom. I'm ashamed of that." That night, I wrote a letter to Margaret. Not out of revenge. Out of truth. "Margaret, I didn't pay off your debt to prove anything to you. I did it because Nathan deserved peace, even if you didn't. I hope someday you'll realize the strength it takes to keep giving when no one gives back. Until then, I'll be away. Not to punish you, but to protect myself. From the woman who never once said thank you. Samantha." I left it with Nathan, knowing he'd give it to her. And for the first time in a year, I slept without waking up angry. 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear from Margaret. Not a call, not a message, not even a second-hand update through Nathan. But strangely, I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her approval anymore. Instead, I started to rebuild, slowly, intentionally. I moved into a small rental above a flower shop owned by a retired couple named Leo and Beth. The place smelled like lavender and fresh soil. It had creaky floors and too many stairs, but it felt like mine. The first night there, I sat cross-legged on the bare floor, eating takeout and sketching a new logo design for a bakery client. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Peaceful. I began picking up more freelance work. A clothing brand. A local bookstore. Even a small charity that needed a full campaign. And this time, I didn't hide it. I put up a professional portfolio, announced my services, and built a small online presence under my own name, Samantha Blake Design. Not Nathan's wife. Not Margaret's daughter-in-law. Just me. Nathan visited sometimes. We kept things slow, cautious. He came by with Thai food and updates from work, listened to me ramble about fonts and client meetings, and never once asked, "So, when are you moving back?" He seemed to understand now that I wasn't looking for a place to stay. I was looking for a life. Then, one Saturday morning, a knock came at my door. I expected Nathan. It wasn't. It was Margaret. She stood there, in a beige coat and heels that looked too tight, holding a thin paper bag and visibly uncomfortable. I didn't say anything. She didn't either, for a moment. Then, "I got your letter." I nodded. "I didn't know how much you did until I saw the receipts." Nathan printed them out. I thought he was exaggerating. I raised an eyebrow. He wasn't. She looked away. No. He wasn't. She held out the bag. I don't know if you still paint. But I saw these at a gallery last week, local brushes, oils, a few canvas boards. They reminded me of what you used to have stacked up in the corner room. I didn't take them at first. I waited. And then she did something I never thought I'd hear from her, something I never expected. I was wrong, she said. About you. About everything. She didn't cry. She didn't make excuses. She didn't try to spin it. I called you names. I acted superior. And I let you clean up my mess while I insulted you behind your back. I don't know how you still have the decency to answer the door, let alone listen. I crossed my arms. What changed? She sighed. Nathan. He told me he might lose you for good. And I realized, if that happens, it'll be because I never saw what was in front of me. I stared at her. Long and hard. Part of me wanted to slam the door. But another part, the part that still wanted healing, told me to listen. I took the bag. Not as forgiveness. As acknowledgement. I don't know what happens next, I told her. But I'm not coming back to that house. Not to the way things were. Margaret nodded. Understood. And if you ever call me a freeloader again, I added, you'll never see me again. Or Nathan. She looked down. You won't hear that word from me again. After she left, I stared at the bag for a long time. Then I opened it. Inside was a small box of artisan paintbrushes, the kind I always wanted but never bought. Tucked between them was a folded note. You didn't have to save me. You did anyway. Thank you. M. That night, I didn't tell Nathan what had happened. Instead, I sent him a photo, a painting I'd just finished. It was simple, a woman standing at the edge of a hill, wind in her hair, arms outstretched. Not flying. Not falling. Just free. He replied with one sentence. She looks like you. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not out of relief, not from vindication, but from peace. 6 months later, I stood in front of a room full of strangers, heart thudding, palms damp. My first solo art and design exhibit had just opened. Not in a massive gallery or some elite downtown studio, but in a small, warm space tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore, my space. The wall behind me was lined with stories told through color, quiet victories, small heartbreaks, silent wars, and healing. The final piece on the wall? A painting titled Debt Paid in Silence. A woman, faceless, carrying the weight of a house on her back, with hands behind her, lifting the very people stepping over her shadow. When the crowd clapped, I didn't cry. I stood tall. Because I'd built this. Not with permission. Not with applause. But with resilience. Nathan arrived an hour later, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. The kind I always said looked like they didn't care what anyone thought. We hadn't moved back in together. Not yet. We were rebuilding, slowly, as individuals first. That was something we agreed on after months of conversations, hard truths, and unlearning old patterns. I want to support you, he'd said one night, not depend on you. I told him, and I want to be loved for who I am, not what I provide. So we stayed in separate apartments. And in that space between us, something beautiful started to grow. Margaret came to the gallery's final showing. She came quietly, without Nathan, and didn't bring gifts or speeches. She just stood in front of the final piece, Debt Paid in Silence, for a long time. Then she found me. I know it's about me, she said softly. I didn't deny it. She continued, but I see the strength in her now. One day, she offered to fund a small grant for other women launching freelance careers, in my name. I told her, don't do it for me. Do it so someone else doesn't have to go through what I did. She said, that's exactly why I want to. As for me, I moved my studio into a permanent space. I mentored 3 young designers. I paid off the rest of my debt, the one I ignored while covering Margaret's. And when I looked at my bank account one morning, realizing I didn't owe anyone anything, not in dollars, not in apologies, not in explanations, I finally let myself breathe. People ask me now if I ever forgave Margaret. And the truth? Yes. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing myself from the weight of needing her to be someone she wasn't ready to be. It meant I no longer lived my life waiting for a thank you. Because I had already thanked myself for surviving. Nathan and I sat in my new studio one rainy evening, sharing tea. I think I'm ready, I said quietly. For what? He asked. To come home. Not the house, I smiled. Home. With you. He nodded, eyes soft. Then let's build it, from scratch. Together this time. And this time, I wasn't walking in with empty hands. I was bringing everything I'd learned, everything I'd built, and everything I had become. I was once called a freeloader. But now? I don't need their words. I have my own. And they're louder than ever.